Okay, so here's a little program I wrote last night on Khan Academy.
Okay.
And we don't have our, sometimes the screen looks a little blue, but it looks like we're okay today. So 10,000 trials. So with a computer program, it's easy to do lots and lots of flips.
The computer does that.
Okay, so I called heads 1 and tails 0 in this case. I guess that's backwards. We did even for heads. I'm doing odd for heads. That's fine. And so I have my flips that I'm keeping track of 3 in a row, and initially I just called them 0, but that's just to name them. And I have 2 variables, I and j. And then flip round, this is going to be the round I'm interested in keeping track of right away.
Yeah.
How many times in round 3 do we match head, tail, tail, or head, tail, head, which is what we just did. And we found we expect how many times?
We expected, wasn't that like, wasn't 1/8 of the time?
1/8 of the time, yeah, which is 12.5%, right? And this is just a counter that I have. So we're going to go through the number of trials. I set flip 1 to be a random number, either 0 or 1. And this formula to do that's a little complicated, but let me just explain it. This random returns a random number between 0 and 1.
Yeah.
So like not an integer?
Not an integer. Floor makes it an integer, but the problem is when it's between 0 and 1 and I floor it, floor takes the integer below it.
So it's always 0.
That's always 0. So what I did here is I added a half to it. So you take a random number between 0 and 1 and add a half to it. Now it's a random number between a half and 1.5.
Yeah.
So half the time when I take the integer below it, I get 0, and half the time when I take the integer below it, I get 1. So that's how I made it be 0 or 1.
Okay.
So flip 2 is 0 or 1. Flip 1 0 1. I mean flip 2 0 or 1, and then I go into a loop. And I just said try 1,000 times till you get either head tail head or head tail tail. You know, that should be enough. Actually, it's not technically enough. You could get tails forever, right?
Yeah.
But you know, it's enough for this. I should have. What I should have done was a while loop here, but I was being a little lazy. So now I take flip 3, and now I look. If flip 1 is heads, here I'm looking at heads, tail, tail. If flip 1 is heads, flip 2 is tails, flip 3 is tails. Hey, we made it. We matched our pattern.
Success.
Success! Yay! We did success on the jth round.
Yep.
And I'm going to say if the jth round was the round we were considering, which last time was round 3.
Yep.
I'm going to count how many times we did it on round 3, for example. And in fact, I think I have it set to round 3 here. So that's what we're going to look at first.
Okay.
Yep, round 3. All right. This is just totaling up how long it took to be successful each time. Then eventually what I'm going to do is add those all up and take the average and see how long it took on average to get either head, tail, heads or head, tail, tails.
Yeah.
Okay?
All right.
And if we don't, then what I do is I set flip 1 to be equal to flip 2, flip 2 equal to flip 3, and I make a new flip 3. So in other words, I started out with a sequence 1, 2, 3, and then when I get down here, it didn't work. So now I need to do a new flip. But now what used to be number 2 in my sequence is number 1. What used to be number 3 is number 2, and then I have a new third one in the sequence. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Or do you want me to show that to you?
I think that makes sense.
Okay. And so then we just keep going until we get a match, and then down here we're going to total them up. For right now, we're just going to look at a specific round, but I have the code already in there for how many total trials we did and the average match time it took. So we'll look at that in a bit. But right now we're looking at round 3, and out of 10,000 times on round 3, we got 1,248.
Which is almost 12.5%.
Which is almost 12.5% for heads, tails, tails, which is what we thought, right?
Yeah.
So I can run it again. If I can find the mouse, there it is. I can run it again. 1243, 12.71, 12.26, 12.65. Ooh, 11.64, that was kind of low. 12.14, 12.51.
That's almost exact.
Yeah, and we'll never necessarily be exact every time, but is this enough do you believe that 12.5% for round 3 is right?
Yeah.
That's what we calculated.
Yeah.
Now let's do heads, tails, heads. And what do you think this one's going to be?
This one,
For round 3?
I think it's going to be, it's around the same thing as we got last time. 11.97, 12.26.
13.01.
It was a little high. 2.18, 2.5, 6.9 is pretty.
5.4.
Okay.
Pretty close.
So it looks like we keep getting around 12 and a half
Yeah.
for that too, for heads, tails, heads, and also heads, tails, tails.
So
Yeah.
And that's what we expected,
yeah.
right? But let's look at round 4 now. Now it gets a little more complicated to do the math. Not super complicated, but let's see what it is for round 4. Okay.
5.
This is heads, tails, heads. This is now what we're calculating is the first time we see the sequence is on flip 4.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. Looks like we're getting around 12 and a half again.
2.14, 2.4. It's this kind of the same thing. We got.
12.9. Sometimes we're a little bigger than 12 and a half.
It's a lot bigger.
Well, 13 isn't that much bigger than 12 and a half. Sometimes we're a little lower.
Yeah.
But it looks like we're somewhere near 12 and a half again for heads, tails, heads.
Yeah.
And you want to check heads, tails, tails?
Okay.
All right.
Okay, 12.83,
11.88.
12.88, 12.17, 13.29, 12.04.
This one we're not getting as
I saw
close.
314. It
Yeah,
was 13.14.
Oh, there.
12 and a half, 12.38. So we do lots of experiments. Sometimes we're above 12 and a half, sometimes we're a little below it.
But we haven't actually landed exactly on it yet.
Yeah, well, when you do experiments, you don't necessarily land on it.
12.51.
Well, that was close.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was pretty close.
It looks like we're at 12 and a half for round 4, too.
Interesting.
For heads, tails, tails. Why don't we talk about why that would be true?
Okay.
Okay,
All
let's
right.
go back to the whiteboard.